Today on Government Matters, budget season for the Pentagon heats up in Washington. Two four-stars break down what they've seen and what you should watch. The job skills the Homeland Security Department needs most. The DHS Chief Learning Officer explains why they're not the skills you might think. And the number one story of the week, Congress hits the pause button on its number one job, funding the government. Two financial management experts tell you what comes next. Government Matters starts right now.
From Washington, D.C. and around the world, this is Government Matters with Francis Rose.
Thanks for watching the weekend edition of Government Matters, the only show covering the latest news, trends, and topics that matter to the business of government. I'm your host, Francis Rose. Budget and authorization season's officially underway in Washington. All of the military services made their budget cases to congressional committees this week, but the discussions and the negotiations still have a very long way to go. General Carter Ham, U.S. Army retired, is president and CEO of the Association of the U.S. Army. He's former commander of U.S. Africa Command. General Norton Schwartz, U.S. Air Force retired, is president of the Institute for Defense Analyses. He's former Chief of Staff of the Air Force. Gentlemen, welcome. Thanks very much for coming on the program. General Ham, you first. What are your biggest takeaways from this week's hearings for both the Army and for all of the services, sir?
Well, Francis, thanks for inviting me to join you. You know, study after study over the past several years have reported that the Defense Department needs 3 to 5% real growth to keep apace with the emerging threats that the United States faces. This defense budget doesn't do that. In the case of the Army, the budget declines from previous years by about $3.5 billion. That's real money. And by about $13 billion from just 2 years ago. That has a significant effect on the ability of the Army to fulfill, like the other services, its ever-expanding set of missions. The second thing I would note, Francis, is not only is the amount of money, the amount of budget is important, but the timing is critical. Because the budget was rolled out so late, Congress has many responsibilities. The likelihood is that we will see yet again the budget not approved in time to begin the fiscal year. That is detrimental to the Department of Defense and to those industries and businesses that support defense.
General Ham, we'll talk about the CR and the potential for one later in our conversation and later in this program. General Schwartz, welcome. Your takeaway from General Brown, Acting Secretary Roth, and General Raymond before appropriating and authorizing committees this week.
I think that the major themes for this really are a departure from what has been an operationally oriented joint force to one that is more postured and looking forward to fielding an improved and a more advanced force for threats we currently and will certainly face in the near-term future. And so there is substantially more research and development and a focus on attempting to eliminate some of the legacy capabilities which are less relevant in the near-term future. And so an example I might highlight for you is that we're talking about bringing on multi-mission platforms, at least in the Air Force. This is true, I think, in the Navy as well, and trying to eliminate or at least reduce the inventory of those platforms that are single mission focused and therefore not as versatile.
General Schwartz, you note the Navy, and apologies to our Navy and Marine Corps friends that I couldn't accommodate one of your peers to join us to talk about that service, and I look forward to doing that on a future edition of this program. General Schwartz, this idea of retiring legacy systems has been something that all of the services have attempted over the years with minimal success. Congress, of course, tells you what you get money for and what you get to do with it. How does one articulate a case well to Congress when they have constituencies to satisfy about retiring something legacy? No program in particular, but just in general, sir.
It is difficult to persuade folks that a promise is better than a bird in the hand. You know, that is clear. but you have to articulate what the logic is, what the game plan is, and also communicate a sense of conviction that you're actually going to feel this improved and more advanced capability going forward. A case in point, perhaps for the Air Force, is V-21. I don't think there's any doubt on the part of the legislators on Capitol Hill about the level of conviction the Air Force has for that capability and a number of others. And so those who will lose some current or legacy capability need to be persuaded that there are successor capabilities that that will compensate for the potential loss of platforms in a particular location, and of course the jobs associated with that. So I think this is the logic of the plan and the conviction that surrounds that program.
General Ham, we have about a minute left. You mentioned the CR, and you mentioned also that this the budget request that exists today would be about $3.5 billion less than what the Army received last fiscal year. Is there potentially a silver lining for the Army that a CR would at least keep it funded at the current levels?
No, I don't think there's any goodness in a CR, Francis. Certainly the amount of money would potentially be helpful, but it's likely that the Congress will place caps on that in any event. It is the amount of money and the predictability. And as General Schwartz noted, the investment in research development, but for the Army in this budget, that amount is also reduced. So not only is procurement reduced for the Army, but research and development is as well. That's the investment in the future. And that's really what I'm concerned about with this budget.
General Ham, General Schwartz, thanks very much for your knowledge and insight today. I appreciate your time very, very much.
Thanks, Francis.
Coming next, thousands of new employees coming at Homeland Security. Straight ahead on Government Matters, the skills the agency needs most may not be what you think. You're watching 7 News. Welcome back. The Department of Homeland Security will take a new look at how it trains its new recruits and its current employees as a result of the pandemic. The department's doing its evaluation as it prepares to hire thousands of new employees across its components. Clotilda Taylor is Chief Learning and Engagement Officer at the Department of Homeland Security. Clo, welcome. Thanks for coming on the program. How did the pandemic change the way that you're thinking about recruiting, retaining, and training and upskilling employees across the department?
Hi, sir. It's a pleasure to be here. If I could answer that very quickly, I would say that a large part of our efforts during the pandemic was to retain our workforce and help employees feel less isolated, was to promote our employee association programs, which is also led by employees. It consists of employees who are drawn together by a common interest or towards our DHS mission. And we actually have been able to recruit, because word of mouth sometimes is one of the best ways to recruit. And we've been able to recruit and retain folks and benefit organizations by expanding our recruitment efforts through our employee associations programs.
You talked recently about what you need moving forward, and you said that the soft skills, especially critical thinking, is the most important thing that you need when you're looking for employees and when you're upskilling the employees you have now. What's the role of an organization like DHS in helping develop skills like critical thinking in the people you already have, Chloe?
Absolutely. As you well aware, I'm sure that those soft skills, some of them are already part of our competency here at DHS, but we want to see more of the communication style of our skills to customer service, and all of those skills are managing, and also managing relationships has been critical to keeping us connected during this time frame. And we truly believe that if you don't have that communication skills where you're able to build relationships and keep those collaboration events going, then you're not going to be ready for the task at the end. So those are the soft skills that we're really looking for.
You've cited resilience as an important element too, and it sounds to me like if one has the skills that you just outlined, those are critical to helping someone continue to be resilient. Am I on the right track?
You're absolutely. And if I could use the word adaptability there, I would definitely put that word as well, that word in there, because that's exactly what we all have to be. It's very adaptable.
So how do you train to resilience and adaptability? Is that a skill that one can learn, and is that a skill that an organization like DHS or the components can teach, Chloe?
Well, it is. It's part of a skill. A lot of that is almost learned behavior, also of who you are as a person. What we have decided that we're going to be more intentional. We're going to work together, emphasizing more teamwork, more team building, so we can look for folks and figure out who's that person that's really resilient, and how can we put them in cohorts, put them in tiger teams where they can spend more time helping to grow others. You provide those opportunities that allow exploration, and that way they give them an opportunity to prepare them before they transition into other roles or support them in their continuous learning opportunities.
You also cited the importance of understanding data analytics. What is it that, and what is it that employees need to know about data analytics? How far down into the weeds do you want your people to get? Obviously, it's dependent on what you expect them to do, but how far into the data analytics field do you want to take some people?
Well, data analytics is a way for us to quickly evaluate conditions and develop options, and it's like everything now. We're collecting data in every area within the Department of Homeland Security, and especially within Chico. We're working fully to utilize data through analytics to uncover meaningful and actionable human capital insights, and those insights, such as identifying factors that would optimize workforce planning, increase employee engagement, or prepare our organization for future of work.
How are you going about collecting that data, and how do you parse it to make sure that it's clean and you're making decisions off data that really is telling you what you think it's telling you?
Well, because it's so critical, we're using surveys. We actually use our pulse surveys that we use. We use exit interviews. We use data analytics systems that pick up on those data, and we actually go directly to our employees and get feedback directly from them, because we feel like they're the ones who's working this. They would know more important. They would know more so than anyone else, because it's so critical. Additionally, our world is changing so rapidly, we must be able to keep and make faster decisions based on some of the data that we're collecting.
Are you learning anything from that data, Chloe, that you didn't expect to see before you dug into it?
Yes, we are. We're learning that people do love what they do. We're learning how and what's important to them. What do they really need in order to get their jobs done? And I think that has been one of the most fascinating things for us. It's like, what do you really need? Is it just, do you need more pencils? Or I'm being facetious, but what is that thing that you really just need to get your job done? So we really are learning a lot from that perspective. We
have about a minute left. What do you expect your overall learning and engagement portfolio to look like a year from now, after things are as close back to normal as they're going to be post-pandemic, and then maybe even 2 and 3 years out?
Yeah, I think you're right. As best we can describe, I do believe that here at DHS, what it will look like is we'll have a more intentional workforce. We'll be more flexible. We'll be more adaptable, and we'll be in a position where we can make sure that folks are comfortable. They have their work-life balance in place, and they're able to give their very best in their workplaces. Because I think you want to go from good to great, but you also want to make sure that folks are feeling comfortable and they feel like they can take care of things at home with their children, with their family, and then give you their very best when they come to work.
Clotilda Taylor of DHS, thanks very much for joining me. It's great to see you.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thank you, sir.
Coming next, the #1 story of the week. Here we go again, a continuing resolution coming into focus. Straight ahead on Government Matters, 2 federal financial management experts on what you should do now to get ready for October 1st. You're watching 7 News. Now, the #1 story of the week. The chairman and the ranking member of the Senate Appropriations Committee agree the budget process is starting later than ever this year. That means at least one continuing resolution is likely, and Senate Appropriations Ranking Member Richard Shelby says, quote, "It's going to be a long winter." Kathleen Turco's director at CGI. She's former chief financial officer of the Department of Veterans Affairs and the General Services Administration. Ariane Whittemore is managing director at Grant Thornton Public Sector. She's former assistant deputy commandant of the Marine Corps for programs and resources. Friends, welcome. Thanks for coming on the program. KT, I start with you. What are the ramifications for financial managers for another CR, and what should they start doing now to prep for October 1?
Thanks for having me on, Francis. I'm sure they're prepping right now. What they're looking at, if you're a budget director or a CFO and working with OMB, you're looking at multiple tracks. You're planning as if you will get an appropriation on October 1, but you have to plan for the CR as well. So there's a lot of work that goes into a CR in terms of the formula, how you go through and assess your daily rates, et cetera. It's a lot of work. In the meantime, remember, many agencies have received the pandemic aid, so they're working through a very large execution year here in fiscal year 21. So they were hoping for 22 it would be a little bit smoother, but with the negotiations that are going on between the infrastructure bill and the 22 submission, $6 trillion is a very large budget that Congress is going to have to work through.
Ariane, welcome back. It's great to see you. Is the track that KT laid out different in the military than it is in the services than it is on the civilian side?
It is not materially different, Francis. The Department of Defense operates under a continuing resolution in a very similar manner as the other agencies. I think the biggest difference is they have ongoing operations that impact around the world. And as you have real world operations and you think about how you keep those going during continuing resolution, that is a little bit of a complexity. I also think this year's a little different in that many agencies starting on 1 October might still have a significant amount of their workforce working virtually. And so the communications and the way of operating under CR may have to change a little bit in this more virtual environment than the last time they've operated under CR. But overall, the Department of Defense operates very similarly. But the other thing I'd say is the Defense Department is looking at some pretty significant changes in their FY22 budget from how they operate today. And of course, under continuing resolution, you have no new starts. So all of those programs which they hope to begin on 1 October will get delayed.
Ariane, that observation about the workforce is interesting because I hadn't considered that, but you're exactly right. The nature of the completion of the work will be completely different in October than it was the last October. KT, what's the implication of that for what financial managers and the people that you interact with as a CFO, the other CXOs across the agencies, what should they be thinking about now when it regards their workforces?
So in regards to their workforce and the overall work is who and what do they need starting in October 1, what will change, but also what will remain the same. So they're just now working through, and OMB is in the processes of updating, telework plans and what the opportunities are going to be for telework. Is it going to be hybrid? Will there be certain positions that have to come back on board? And how do you plan for those? And how would that then get computed into a CR, right? A continuing resolution is going to be at the 21 level, operating level. So how will that look for 2022, and how does that get accommodated? So working across, the CFOs are having to work with the C-suite and the program managers to determine how they're going to operate on October 1 and if there are any differences. Of course, if you look at the 22 budget submission, President Biden has asked for, through the American Families Plan and through the American Jobs Plan, he has asked for a significant increase, almost $5 trillion, $6 trillion, that's going to impact the civilian agencies. And so then there's a huge amount of planning that goes in with that type of budget increase. And so on top of everything else they're doing, they're now looking at what they're going to need to do for 2022. But of course, there's no new starts, there's no funding for that. So they're going to have to juggle getting through this year, starting into the CR, and continuing to plan for the 22 budget increases.
Ariana, who is the CFO's best friend, the financial manager's best friend in navigating a continuing resolution?
And it's your legal counsel. I will tell you that throughout the continuing resolution process, your legal counsel should be at your right hand to ensure that everything that you plan and do during that CR period is within the statutes. A continuing resolution is pretty consistent. As KT pointed out, you operate at the prior year's level, but sometimes there are some anomalies allowed by OMB and the Congress in terms of additional funding, some new starts, things like that. And so having a legal counsel at your right hand is very important.
Ariana, KT, thank you very much for joining me today. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
You're very welcome, Franklin.
Don't forget, if you miss an episode of Government Matters, it's on our website, govmatters.tv, and you get a preview and a recap of every show when you sign up for our daily newsletters. You can do it now. You just enter your email in the red box on the website. I'm back in 2 minutes. Finally today, a personal message to Francis Sr. Happy Father's Day. I love you, Dad. To Francis III, thank you for making me such a proud father. I love you too. Happy Father's Day, everybody.